My granddaughter Emily didn't come home from school yesterday. My daughter Helen told me she's staying at a friend's house for the week, but her voice trembled when she said it. I sat at my kitchen table, the cold linoleum under my feet, and I knew she was lying. Helen has been nervous for months, jumping at phone calls, but this is different. Emily is only 8. I picked up my landline and called the school. The secretary said Emily was marked absent yesterday and today. No note from Helen. My heart squeezed tight. I had to find her before tonight, before whatever Helen is hiding gets worse. I stood up, my knees cracking, and walked to Helen's old room where she's been staying. I rifled through her dresser drawers, my hands shaking. Under a pile of sweaters, I found a folded paper, a receipt from a bus station dated yesterday. The destination was a city 4 hours away. Helen never takes buses. She always drives. I stared at that slip of paper, the numbers blurring. Why would she send Emily away on a bus without telling me? The quiet in the house felt heavy. I needed to see Helen's bank statements. She left her laptop on the coffee table. I opened it, my fingers clumsy. The password was Emily's birthday. I clicked on the banking app. Large withdrawals, all cash, over the last 3 months. The last one was yesterday, $5,000. My breath caught. Helen doesn't have that kind of money. Where did it come from? And why now? I heard a car pull into the driveway. Helen's car. I quickly closed the laptop, my pulse racing. She can't know I'm looking. I slipped the receipt into my apron pocket. When she walked in, I smiled and asked if she wanted tea. She nodded, avoiding my eyes. I poured the water, my mind racing. That receipt and the money, they're connected. I need to find out how. But first, I have to act normal, for Emily's sake. I called my son Michael, who lives across town. He's always been the sensible one. I told him Emily was missing, and Helen was acting strange. He sighed and said, "Mum, you're overreacting. Helen's just stressed with work." But I heard the doubt in his voice. I asked him to check Helen's social media. Maybe there were clues. He agreed, reluctantly. I hung up and looked at the clock. It was almost noon. I had to get to the bus station myself. I grabbed my purse and coat, my hands still unsteady. The drive felt longer than usual. At the station, I showed the receipt to a ticket agent. He remembered a woman matching Helen's description, buying a ticket for a child yesterday. He said the child seemed quiet, scared. My stomach turned. I asked if he saw anything else. He shrugged and said a man in a dark jacket was watching them from across the room. He didn't get a good look. I thanked him and walked back to my car, the cold air biting my cheeks. "Back home," Michael called. He found messages on Helen's old Facebook account, deleted, but he recovered them. They were about a deal and clearing debt. One mentioned a shipment next week. He sounded worried now. I told him about the man at the bus station. We both fell silent. Then he said, "Mum, I'll come over tonight. We need to talk to Helen together?" I agreed, but I knew Helen would deny everything. She always does. After hanging up, I went to Emily's room. Her favorite doll was on the bed. I picked it up, holding it tight. That's when I noticed her school backpack was gone. Not just for a sleepover. Everything was taken. I sat on her bed, the doll in my lap. Helen had packed all of Emily's things. This wasn't a temporary trip. She meant for Emily to be gone for good. Helen came home late, her eyes red from crying. I confronted her in the living room, my voice low. "Where is Emily, Helen? Tell me the truth." She burst into tears and said she sent Emily to a better family because she couldn't afford to care for her anymore. She claimed it was a private adoption, but her story didn't add up. She mentioned money problems, debts from her ex-husband. I pressed her, and she snapped, "It's none of your business, Mom. You'll never understand." She stormed out, slamming the door. I stood there, trembling. A private adoption? Without my knowledge? I didn't believe her. I went to my desk and pulled out my address book. I called an old friend who works at the family court. She told me no legal adoption would happen that fast, without paperwork. My fear grew. I remembered the man at the bus station. Was he involved? I decided to check Helen's phone records. She left her bill on the counter. I scanned the numbers. One repeated often, a local prefix. I dialed it, my heart pounding. A man answered, his voice rough. "Yeah?" I hung up immediately. That voice. I'd heard it before. Helen's ex, Jack, used to have friends like that. Jack was into drugs before they divorced. Could Helen be mixed up with them again? I needed proof. I went online and searched for recent arrests or news about trafficking in our area. One article mentioned a ring broken up last month, but suspects were still at large. I printed it out, my hands cold. Helen came back inside, calmer now. She apologized and said she'd bring Emily home soon, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I nodded and said nothing. Later, I found a hidden envelope in her room, cash, lots of it, with a note. Final payment. My blood ran cold. This wasn't adoption. This was a sale. I called the police station, but the officer said without evidence of crime they couldn't help. He suggested I file a missing person report, but Helen would just say Emily is with family. I hung up, frustrated. I needed harder proof. I drove to the library to use a computer. Helen might check my history at home. I looked up the number I'd called earlier. It belonged to an auto repair shop on the east side, a place known for shady deals. I wrote down the address. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type. On the way home, I stopped at the bank. I asked about Helen's account, but they couldn't share details without her permission. I left, feeling defeated. But then I remembered. I'm on her account as a joint holder from when she was a teen. I went back inside and showed my ID. The teller pulled up the transactions. Large cash deposits over the last 2 months, all from the same source, a business name I didn't recognize. One withdrawal yesterday matched the bus ticket purchase. I asked for a printout. The teller hesitated, but gave it to me. Back in the car, I studied the paper. The business was listed as Midnight Imports. I'd never heard of it. I called Michael and told him everything. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Mum, I think Helen sold Emily to pay off drug debts. Jack's old crowd." My vision blurred. I pulled over to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel. How could my own daughter do this? I took a deep breath. I couldn't fall apart. Emily needed me. I drove home, planning my next move. Helen was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed. "Where have you been?" she demanded. I smiled thinly and said I was visiting a friend. She didn't believe me. I could see the fear in her eyes. She knows I'm getting close. I invited Helen for coffee this morning, acting calm. I needed to record her confession. I set my old tape recorder in my sweater pocket, the one I used for my book club meetings. We sat at the kitchen table, the steam from our cups rising between us. I asked her gently about the money and Emily. At first she denied it, but then she broke down. She admitted she owed money to dangerous people, men who threatened her if she didn't pay. She said she had no choice but to give Emily away to settle the debt. Her words were vague, but she mentioned a handoff at the bus station. I kept my voice steady, asking where Emily is now. She shook her head and said, "It's better you don't know, Mum." They'll hurt us if you interfere. I pressed stop on the recorder, my heart aching. After she left for work, I called a lawyer, a friend from church who handles family cases. I played her the recording. She listened carefully and said it might not be enough for police, but it's a start. She advised me to gather more evidence, bank records, witnesses. I hung up and looked at Emily's photo on the wall. My sweet girl. I won't let Helen get away with this. I went to Helen's room and searched again. This time I found a burner phone hidden in a shoebox. It had one number saved. I dialed it, and a man answered, barking, "Is it done?" I stayed silent, then hung up. My hands were ice cold. That voice, it was the same as before. I realized Helen isn't just a victim. She's part of this. She sold my granddaughter. I put the phone back, my mind clear now. I need to protect myself and find Emily. I'll start by changing my will tomorrow, cutting Helen out completely. But first, I have to ensure she doesn't suspect anything. I'll play the loving grandmother a little longer. For Emily. I hid the burner phone in my purse, my hands trembling. Helen would be back from work in an hour, and I needed to trace that number before she realized it was gone. I drove to the library again, using their computer to look up the number. It was registered to a prepaid service, untraceable without a subpoena. My hope faded, but I couldn't give up. I called Michael and asked him to meet me at my house. We had to confront Helen together with the evidence I had. He agreed, his voice heavy with worry. Back home, I placed the burner phone back in Helen's shoebox, my pulse thudding in my ears. Just as I finished, Helen walked in early, her face pale. "What were you doing in my room?" she demanded, her eyes narrow. I forced a smile and said I was looking for a missing earring. She didn't believe me. I saw the suspicion in her gaze. She stepped closer, her voice a low hiss. "Stay out of my things, Mom. You don't know what you're messing with." That threat hung in the air as she stormed to her room. I stood in the hallway, my knees weak. Michael arrived minutes later, and we sat in the kitchen. I showed him the bank records and played the tape of Helen's confession. He listened, his face hardening. "We have to go to the police again," he said. But I knew they'd need more. Suddenly, my landline rang. It was an unknown number, I answered, and a man's voice, the same one from the burner phone, said, "Tell Helen the deal is moving up. Tomorrow, or the kid's gone." Then he hung up. I froze, the receiver slipping from my hand. Michael asked what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. Tomorrow? That meant Emily was still nearby, but time was running out. I had to find where they were holding her. And now Helen knew I was digging. I decided to follow Helen today. She called in sick to work, which she never does. I told Michael to stay nearby in his car in case I needed help. I parked down the street from our house, watching Helen leave in her car. She drove across town to a run-down apartment building I'd never seen before. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I saw her meet a man in a dark jacket, the same one from the bus station. They argued on the sidewalk, and he handed her an envelope. She shoved it into her purse and drove off. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding. She went to a storage unit facility on the outskirts of town. I waited until she left, then approached the gate. It was locked, needing a code. I scribbled down the unit number she'd visited, B12. Back in my car, I called the facility, pretending to be Helen and saying I forgot my code. The clerk hesitated, but gave it to me when I provided Helen's phone number from the bill I'd seen. I drove home, my mind racing. What was in that unit? Evidence or something worse? When I arrived, Helen was waiting in the driveway, her arms crossed. "Where were you, Mom?" she asked, her tone sharp. I said I was at the grocery store, but she eyed my empty hands. She didn't push it, but I saw her glance at my car's odometer. Later, I found my house keys missing from my hook by the door. Helen must have taken them. She was locking me out of my own investigation. I felt a chill. She was cutting me off, and I had less than a day to stop whatever was happening tomorrow. I woke early, before dawn, and called a locksmith to change the locks on my doors. I couldn't risk Helen sabotaging me further. Then I drove to the storage unit alone, using the code I'd gotten. Unit B12 was packed with boxes, but one was open, full of children's clothes and toys. Emily's things. My breath caught. Under a pile, I found a ledger with names, dates, and amounts of money. It listed E with a date from yesterday and a location, a truck stop off Highway 7. My hands shook as I took photos with my phone. This was proof of trafficking, not just a debt payment. I heard a car pull up outside the unit. I hid behind a box, peeking out. It was Helen and the man from earlier. They were arguing about moving the merchandise today. Helen said, "My mum's getting too close. We need to end this now." The man growled, "Then deal with her, or I will." I stayed still, my heart hammering. After they left, I rushed back to my car and called Michael. I sent him the photos and told him about the truck stop. He said he'd meet me there with a friend who's a retired cop. We had to act fast. The handoff might be happening this morning. As I drove toward Highway 7, my phone buzzed. It was Helen. "Mom, where are you?" she asked, her voice too sweet. I told her I was at the doctor's. She paused, then said, "Stay there. I'll pick you up." But I knew she was lying. She was trying to stop me. I accelerated, my eyes on the road. I had to reach that truck stop before they moved Emily. I arrived at the truck stop, a dusty place with big rigs lined up. Michael was already there with his friend, Joe. We split up to look for any sign of Emily. I checked the diner, my eyes scanning every booth. No child matching her description. Then I saw Helen's car parked behind the building. I gestured to Michael, and we approached slowly. Through the window, I saw Helen inside, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. The woman handed Helen a stack of cash, and Helen passed over a small backpack. Emily's school bag. My blood ran cold. This was the exchange. I started recording on my phone, but a truck horn blared, drawing attention. Helen looked out and saw me. Her face went white. She rushed out, grabbing my arm. "What are you doing here?" she snarled. I pulled away, but she held tight. Michael and Joe ran over, and Joe flashed a badge. He'd brought his old ID. Helen let go, stepping back. The woman inside fled out the back door. We had Helen cornered, but she laughed bitterly. "You're too late, Mum. Emily's already gone. They took her last night." My legs almost gave way. She'd known we were coming and moved the timeline. I showed her the recording I'd made. "This is enough for the police, Helen. Tell us where she is." Helen's smirk faded, and she looked at the cash in her hand. "You'll never find her," she whispered. Then she turned and ran to her car, speeding away. We stood there, stunned. The ledger, the recording, it was all for nothing if Emily was already sold. I called the police immediately, reporting the incident. But as I hung up, I realized Helen had left her purse behind in the diner. Inside, I found a receipt for a bus ticket. One way, for a child, to a city I'd never heard of. Departure. Today. I handed the bus receipt to the police officer who arrived at the truck stop. He took notes, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Without Emily here, it was her word against Helen's. Michael and I drove to the bus station in the city on the receipt, a 3-hour drive. I prayed we weren't too late. At the station, we showed Emily's photo to everyone. One ticket agent remembered a child matching her description being put on a bus to the border early this morning. My heart sank. The border? That meant they were taking her out of the state, maybe the country. We called the police again, giving them the update. They said they'd issue an Amber Alert, but it could take time. Back home, exhaustion hit me. I changed the locks as planned and called my lawyer to update my will, removing Helen entirely. I left everything to Michael and, if found, Emily. As I hung up, my doorbell rang. It was a social worker. Helen had called them, claiming I was unstable and neglecting myself. I invited her in, my hands steady. I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, the recordings, the ledger photos, the bus receipts. The social worker listened, her expression shifting from skepticism to concern. She promised to look into it and left. But later that evening, Helen showed up with a police officer demanding to be let in for her belongings. I allowed it, watching as she packed. She didn't speak to me, but as she left, she slipped a note into my hand. "Check the old treehouse," it read. My breath caught. The treehouse in our backyard, where Emily loved to play. Was it a trap or a clue? I waited until dark, then walked out back with a flashlight. The treehouse was empty except for a small folded drawing, Emily's, of a house with a red door. I recognized it. A cabin we visited years ago, up north. Was that where they took her? I clutched the drawing, my mind racing. Helen had given me this. But why? Was she having second thoughts or leading me into danger? I had to find out before morning. I held Emily's drawing of the cabin with the red door, my hands trembling. This was the clue I needed to find her before they moved her again. I called Michael immediately, describing the cabin we visited years ago up north. He remembered it and said he'd meet me there, but warned it could be a trap set by Helen. I didn't care. I had to go. I grabbed my coat and keys, ignoring the ache in my back. The drive would take 2 hours, and I had to leave now to arrive before daylight. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Helen's car parked down the street. She was watching me. My jaw tightened. I drove off, keeping an eye on my rearview mirror. She didn't follow, but I knew she might have alerted others. The highway was dark and empty, my headlights cutting through the fog. I thought about Emily, alone and scared. What if I was too late? I pushed the fear down and focused on the road. When I reached the turnoff for the cabin, I parked a mile away and walked through the woods, using a small flashlight. The cabin came into view, its red door faint in the moonlight. No lights were on inside. I crept closer, my heart pounding. Through a window, I saw a figure moving, a man I didn't recognize. Then I heard a child's cry. "Emily?" My breath caught. I backed away and called Michael, whispering my location. But as I hung up, a hand clamped over my mouth from behind. I struggled, but the grip was strong. Helen's voice hissed in my ear. "I told you to stay out of this, Mom." She dragged me toward the cabin, and I saw the man inside open the red door. Helen shoved me into the cabin, and the man locked the door behind us. The room was sparse, with a single mattress on the floor. Emily wasn't there. The cry must have been a recording or my imagination. Helen faced me, her eyes wild. "You've ruined everything," she spat. I stood my ground, asking where Emily was. She laughed bitterly and said, "She's already gone, but you'll never find her now." The man stepped forward, demanding the money Helen owed him. She handed him an envelope from her pocket. and he counted the cash. I realized this was a payoff for something worse. I kept my voice calm, telling Helen I'd recorded our conversation and had evidence with the police. Her confidence wavered. The man eyed me suspiciously and left, saying he'd be back in an hour. Once he was gone, Helen slumped into a chair, tears in her eyes. She admitted she never meant for it to go this far. The debts were from Jack's old drug habits, and these men threatened to hurt Emily if she didn't cooperate. But she claimed Emily was safe for now, hidden in a foster home under a fake name, as part of a deal to pay off the debt. I didn't believe her. The ledger I'd found suggested trafficking. I pressed for the foster home's location, but she refused, saying it would put Emily in more danger. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Almost there. Police are on the way." I hid my relief, but Helen saw my expression change. She stood up, grabbing a knife from the counter. "Give me your phone, Mum," she demanded. I handed it over slowly, praying Michael would arrive soon. Helen took my phone and turned it off, tossing it into a corner. She paced the cabin, the knife still in her hand. I sat quietly, watching for any chance to escape. The dawn light began to filter through the windows. I asked Helen about the foster home, trying to keep her talking. She revealed it was run by a woman named Marta, who places children for a fee. My stomach churned. This was illegal adoption, not just debt payment. Helen said Marta had Emily in a house near the city, but she wouldn't give the address. I remembered the social worker I'd spoken to earlier and wondered if I could contact her. Suddenly, headlights flashed outside. Michael's car. Helen panicked, running to the back door. I shouted for Michael, and he burst in with Joe, the retired cop. Helen tried to flee, but Joe restrained her. Michael hugged me, asking if I was okay. I nodded, pointing at Helen. "She knows where Emily is. A foster home with Marta." Joe called the local police, and within minutes, officers arrived. They took Helen into custody for questioning. I gave them all the evidence I had, the recordings, the ledger photos, and now Helen's confession about Marta. The police said they'd investigate the foster home, but it could take time. As they led Helen away, she looked back at me, her eyes filled with hate. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I didn't flinch. Back at home, I felt exhausted but determined. Michael stayed with me, making tea. We waited for news from the police, but my mind kept racing. What if Marta moved Emily after Helen's arrest? I had to find that address myself. I went online and searched for foster homes run by someone named Marta in our state. One listing matched: a small, unlicensed home in a nearby town. I wrote down the address, my hands shaking. This was my next move. I drove to the address I found for Marta's foster home, with Michael following in his car. It was a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, with a faded sign that read, "Children's Haven." I parked down the street and watched for any activity. After an hour, a woman matching Marta's description, based on Helen's vague details, came out with a little girl. It was Emily. My heart leapt. She looked thin and tired, but she was alive. I started to get out of the car, but Michael stopped me. "Wait, Mum. Let's call the police first. We don't know who else is inside." I agreed, dialing 911 and explaining the situation. They said they'd send a unit, but it might take 20 minutes. I couldn't wait that long. What if they left? I decided to approach slowly, pretending to be a lost grandmother. I walked up the driveway, smiling at Marta. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my friend's house," I said. She eyed me suspiciously and told me to leave. Then Emily saw me and cried out, "Grandma!" Marta tried to pull her inside, but I stepped forward, my voice firm. "That's my granddaughter. The police are on their way." Marta's face paled, and she shoved Emily toward me before running back into the house. I hugged Emily tight, tears in my eyes. Michael joined us, and we waited for the police. When they arrived, they searched the house and found documents linking Marta to illegal adoptions. They arrested her and took Emily into protective custody temporarily. At the station, I provided all my evidence, and the police assured me Emily would be returned to me once paperwork was done. But as we left, I received a call from Helen's lawyer. She was being released on bail due to lack of direct proof of trafficking. My relief turned to fear. Helen was free, and she knew I had Emily back. I brought Emily home, setting up her room just as it was. She was quiet, clinging to me, and I promised she'd never be taken again. Michael helped me install security cameras around the house, worried about Helen's release. Later that day, Helen showed up, demanding to see Emily. I didn't let her in, speaking through the locked screen door. She cried, saying she was sorry and wanted to make amends. But I saw the emptiness in her eyes. It was another act. I told her she needed help and to stay away until the court decided. She left, but not before threatening to fight for custody, claiming I was too old to care for Emily. My blood ran cold. I called my lawyer and started the process for emergency guardianship, using the evidence of Helen's actions. The next morning, a social worker visited to assess our home for Emily's placement. I showed her the safe environment and Emily's happiness here. She approved temporarily, but a court hearing was set for next week. I knew Helen would use every trick to win, so I gathered more proof. Bank records, the ledger, and statements from Michael and Joe. I also contacted the parents of other children from Marta's home, building a case against Helen. As I organized the documents, my doorbell rang. It was a process server. Helen had filed a petition accusing me of elder abuse and neglect, based on her false claims to social services. I took the papers, my hands steady. This was her move to discredit me, but I was ready. I called my lawyer and scheduled a meeting for tomorrow. That evening, I read Emily a bedtime story, her small hand in mine. She fell asleep quickly, and I watched her, my resolve hardening. I wouldn't let Helen destroy this second chance. I had the truth on my side, and I'd fight until the end. But as I turned off the light, I saw a shadow outside the window. Was it Helen? Or just my fear? I checked the security camera feed on my phone, but it showed nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. I checked the security camera feed on my phone, scrolling through the night's recordings. Nothing moved except branches in the wind, but the unease stayed with me. I had barely slept, my mind racing with Helen's legal threats. Emily was still asleep, her breathing soft from the monitor. I made coffee, my hands unsteady. Today, I had to fight back harder. I called my lawyer, Sarah, and we met at her office downtown. I drove there, the morning traffic slow. Sarah greeted me warmly, but her face turned serious as I laid out the evidence. She said Helen's petition for elder abuse was a common tactic to discredit me in custody battles. We needed to prove my competence and Helen's instability. I showed her the recordings where Helen admitted her debts and the ledger photos. Sarah nodded, taking notes. She advised me to collect affidavits from friends, doctors, and anyone who could vouch for me. I also needed to document my daily routine with Emily to show stability. Leaving her office, I felt a bit hopeful, but exhausted. Back home, I saw that car again, a blue sedan like Helen's, parked 2 houses down. I didn't approach. Instead, I went inside and called Michael. He said he'd come after work. I started gathering documents, my medical records, bank statements showing I manage my finances, and photos of Emily and me happy together. I found that school letter and added it to the pile. Then the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Gable, the social worker assigned to our case. She said she was doing an unannounced visit to assess the home. I welcomed her in, offering tea. She walked through the house, checking Emily's room, the kitchen, asking about safety measures. I showed her the security system and Emily's organized space. She asked about my health, and I mentioned my recent checkup, showing her a doctor's note. She seemed impressed, but then brought up Helen's statement from a neighbor, Mr. Dolan, who claimed I often seemed confused and left appliances on. I was shocked. Mr. Dolan is a quiet man who barely knows me. I assured her it wasn't true and suggested we speak to him together. She agreed to follow up. After she left, I felt angry and betrayed. Helen was turning people against me. Michael arrived, and I told him everything. We decided to visit Mr. Dolan right away, but as we were about to leave, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, and a raspy voice said, "Back off from Helen, or you'll lose more than Emily." Then silence. I gripped the phone, my heart pounding. This wasn't just Helen. Someone else was involved. After that threatening call, I knew I couldn't back down. Michael and I drove to Mr. Dolan's house, a few blocks away. He answered the door, looking nervous. I asked him about his statement to the social worker. He admitted Helen had paid him $50 to say those things about me. My anger flared, but I kept calm. I told him he could be charged for false statements, and he quickly agreed to recant. We recorded his confession on my phone. This was a small victory, but it showed Helen's desperation. Back home, I called Sarah and updated her. She said this would help discredit Helen in court. The hearing was in 3 days, and I needed to be prepared. That evening, I focused on Emily, helping her with homework and reading her a story. She seemed happier, but I noticed she had nightmares about being taken away. It broke my heart. I reassured her that she was safe with me. The next morning, I received a letter from the court. Helen had filed for visitation rights, claiming she wanted to rebuild her relationship with Emily. I knew it was a ploy to get close to her, or maybe even take her again. I discussed it with Michael, and we agreed to oppose it strongly. I called Sarah, and she said we could argue that Helen posed a risk based on the evidence. Later, I took Emily to the park to distract her, but I kept looking over my shoulder, fearing Helen might appear. While there, I saw a woman watching us from a distance. It wasn't Helen, but she looked familiar. I packed up quickly and left. At home, I checked the security cameras and saw the same woman near our house earlier. Who was she? I called Joe, the retired cop, and described her. He said he'd look into it. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I reviewed all the evidence, making copies for the court. I found a page from the ledger I had missed. It had a phone number with a local area code. I dialed it, and a woman answered. "Marta's Services, how can I help?" I hung up, stunned. Marta was still operating. I thought she was arrested. This meant the network was bigger than I thought. I had to tell the police. But with Helen's threats, I wasn't sure who to trust. I decided to call Joe first thing in the morning. But as I put the phone down, I heard a noise outside, like someone trying to open a window. I grabbed my phone and crept to the living room. The security alarm hadn't gone off, but I saw a shadow move past the curtain. My breath caught. Someone was trying to break in. I activated the panic button on my security system, and the alarm blared loudly. The shadow outside vanished, and I heard footsteps running away. I called 911 immediately, reporting the attempted break-in. Police arrived within minutes, but they found no one. They checked the perimeter and saw scratch marks on the window lock, confirming someone had tried to force entry. I gave them a description of the shadow, but it was too vague. After they left, I felt shaken, but relieved Emily was safe. I called Michael, and he came over to stay the night. The next morning, I called Joe and told him about Marta's phone number still being active. He said he'd inform his contacts in the police department to investigate further. I also reported the threatening call and the break-in attempt to my lawyer, Sarah. She said this could strengthen our case against Helen, as it showed ongoing harassment. The court hearing was tomorrow, and I spent the day preparing my testimony. I practiced what to say, focusing on the facts, Helen's actions, the evidence, and my capability as a guardian. Emily was anxious, so I let her help me organize papers, making it a game. Later, Sarah called with news. The police had arrested Marta again, and she was cooperating, revealing names of others involved in the illegal adoption ring. This included Helen's associate, the man from the cabin. Sarah said this could lead to more charges against Helen. I felt a glimmer of hope. But that evening, Helen showed up at my door with a police officer, demanding to see Emily based on her visitation filing. I refused, citing the break-in and threats. The officer advised her to wait for the court decision. Helen left, but she screamed that I'd pay for this. After she was gone, I noticed an envelope had been slipped under the door. I opened it carefully. It contained photos of me and Emily at the park yesterday, with a note. "Stop now, or these will be the last." My hands trembled. They were watching us closely. I showed Michael, and we decided to increase security. I called the police again, reporting the stalking. They said they'd patrol the area more often. That night, I hugged Emily tighter, promising to protect her. But as I lay in bed, I wondered how deep this went. Was Helen working alone, or was there a larger group? I had to find out before the hearing. The day of the court hearing arrived. I dressed carefully, wanting to look competent and calm. Michael came with me, and Sarah met us at the courthouse. Helen was there with her lawyer, looking defiant. The judge listened to both sides. I presented my evidence: the recordings, bank records, Mr. Dolan's recantation, and the police reports about the threats and break-in. Helen's lawyer argued that Helen was a victim of coercion and was seeking rehabilitation. He presented character witnesses who said Helen was a good mother under stress. The judge seemed skeptical, but decided to delay the ruling for a week to review more evidence. I was disappointed, but not surprised. As we left the courtroom, Helen approached me, her eyes pleading. "Mum, I just want to see my daughter. Please," she said. I shook my head and walked away. Outside, Michael and I discussed what to do next. Sarah suggested we gather more evidence of Helen's involvement with Marta's ring. I remembered the photos from the park and decided to trace them. I called Joe, and he said he could help investigate the photographer. Back home, I felt exhausted but determined. Emily was with a babysitter, and when I returned, she ran to me, asking if everything was okay. I smiled and said yes, but inside, I was worried. That night, Joe called with news. He had identified the woman from the photos as a private investigator hired by Helen. He had her address and was going to confront her. I thanked him, but I felt uneasy. Why would Helen hire a PI? To gather dirt on me? Or something else? I decided to visit the PI myself, against Joe's advice. The next morning, I drove to the address Joe gave me, a small office in a strip mall. I walked in, and the woman was there, the same one from the park. She looked surprised to see me. I demanded to know why she was following us. She hesitated, then said, Helen hired her to prove I was unfit, but she had found nothing. Then she handed me a file. It contained photos of Helen meeting with known associates of Marta, including the man from the cabin. My eyes widened. This was new evidence. I took the file and left quickly. As I drove home, I realized this could change everything. But when I arrived, my house was surrounded by police cars. My heart dropped. What happened? I parked and rushed out, asking an officer what was going on. He said they received an anonymous tip about a child endangerment situation at my address. I saw Emily standing with a social worker, looking scared. I explained that I was her grandmother and had legal custody pending. The officer checked my ID and said they had to investigate due to the tip. I showed them the security system and the evidence I just gathered, including the file from the PI. They took notes, but said Emily had to be placed temporarily in foster care until it was cleared. I felt devastated. This had to be Helen's doing. The anonymous tip. I called Sarah immediately, and she said she'd file an emergency motion to get Emily back. Michael arrived and helped me calm down. We provided all documents to the police, and they agreed to expedite the investigation. Later that day, Sarah called. The judge had reviewed the new evidence and ordered Emily returned to me, as the tip was deemed malicious. I picked up Emily from the social services office, hugging her tightly. She cried, and I promised it was over. Back home, I reinforced the security and decided to take action against Helen. With the new evidence from the PI, Sarah said we could press charges against Helen for harassment and involvement in illegal activities. I agreed. We filed a restraining order and provided all evidence to the district attorney. A few days later, Helen was arrested based on the new proof. She was charged with multiple counts, including child endangerment and fraud. The court granted me permanent guardianship of Emily. I felt a sense of relief, but also sadness for my daughter. Helen's actions had destroyed our family, but Emily was safe. Michael and I focused on healing, taking Emily to therapy and creating a stable home. I knew there might be more challenges, but for now, we had peace. As I tucked Emily into bed that night, she smiled and said, "I love you, Grandma." I kissed her forehead, feeling that all the fight was worth it. But deep down, I wondered if Helen would ever change, or if this was just the beginning of a longer battle. A certified letter arrived today from the district attorney's office, stating that Helen is appealing her charges and requesting a new custody hearing based on new evidence. My hands shook as I read it. Emily was colouring at the kitchen table, and I forced a smile so she wouldn't worry. I called Sarah, my lawyer, immediately. She said Helen's team is claiming coercion and that I influenced witnesses. We have to prepare for another court battle. I felt the weight of it all, the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance. After hanging up, I checked the security cameras, something I do habitually now. An unfamiliar car was parked across the street for hours. I took a photo and sent it to Joe, asking if he could identify it. He called back later, saying it was registered to a man named Leo, who has ties to Marta's network. My stomach tightened. They're still watching us. I decided to take Emily to the library for a change of scenery. But as we left, I saw the car drive away slowly. At the library, Emily picked out books while I used a computer to search for Leo online. I found a few mentions in old news articles about fraud cases, but nothing recent. When we returned home, there was a voicemail from Helen's lawyer demanding I return his call to discuss a settlement. I deleted it without responding. That evening, Michael visited, and I showed him the letter and the photo. He offered to stay over again, but I declined, not wanting to disrupt his family. After he left, I double-checked all the locks and alarms. As I was tucking Emily in, she asked if her mum was ever coming back. I told her we were safe here, but my heart ached. Later, I found an old photo album and looked at pictures of Helen as a child, happy and innocent. How did it come to this? I closed the album, determined to protect Emily no matter what. But as I turned off the lights, I noticed a flicker on the security monitor, a figure moving near the backyard fence. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but it was gone. Was it real? Or just my fear? I couldn't take any chances. I called the police about the figure, and they sent a unit to check the area. They found nothing, but advised me to keep the security system active. I couldn't sleep, so I spent the night reviewing all the evidence for the upcoming hearing. In the morning, I took Emily to school, driving a different route to avoid any potential followers. After dropping her off, I met with Sarah at her office. She had received Helen's new evidence, a statement from a woman claiming to be a former neighbour who said I often left Emily alone for hours. I knew it was false. That woman moved away years ago. Sarah said we need to discredit this quickly. I contacted old friends and gathered affidavits about my care for Emily. It was exhausting, but necessary. Later, I picked up Emily and we went grocery shopping. At the store, I saw Leo, the man from the car, lingering in the aisle. He didn't approach, but his presence was a clear message. I hurried Emily out and drove home, my heart racing. Back home, I called Joe and described Leo. He said he'd look into his current activities. That evening, Michael came over with dinner, and we discussed adding more security lights. While he was there, the doorbell rang. It was a process server with another subpoena for documents related to my finances. Helen is trying to prove I'm unfit due to financial instability. I provided the records, showing my pension and savings are sufficient. After Michael left, I felt overwhelmed. I sat with Emily, helping her with homework, and she drew a picture of our house with "No bad guys" written on it. I hugged her, fighting back tears. Later, I checked my email and found a message from an unknown sender. "Drop the case, or things will get worse." I forwarded it to Sarah and the police. As I was about to shut down the computer, I noticed a file I hadn't opened before. A scanned document from Helen's ledger that I must have missed. It listed payments to a Guardian ad litem involved in our case. My blood ran cold. Could someone in the system be corrupted? I saved the file and decided to discuss it with Sarah tomorrow. But first, I had to ensure Emily's safety tonight. I brought the new ledger finding to Sarah first thing in the morning. She was alarmed and said we should present it to the judge as evidence of possible corruption. The custody hearing is in 2 days, and the pressure is mounting. After the meeting, I took Emily to a therapy session, something we've started to help her cope. She's opening up more, but she still has nightmares. On the way home, I saw Leo's car again, this time following us at a distance. I drove to the police station instead of home and reported it. An officer took a statement and said they'd increase patrols near our house. Back home, I felt a bit safer, but the stress is taking a toll on my health. My doctor increased my blood pressure medication, warning me to reduce stress. How can I, when Emily's future is at stake? That afternoon, Michael visited with his kids, and we had a small picnic in the backyard. For a few hours, it felt normal. Laughter, sunshine, Emily playing with her cousins. But when they left, the silence felt heavy. I received a call from the social worker, Mrs. Gable, who wanted to do another home visit before the hearing. I agreed, and she came over, asking detailed questions about my daily routine and support system. I showed her the security measures and Emily's improved mood. She seemed satisfied, but then mentioned that Helen has a new lawyer who is very aggressive. After she left, I checked the court filings online and saw that Helen is now claiming I have early dementia based on a forged doctor's note. I was furious. I called my actual doctor, and he agreed to provide a certified statement of my mental fitness. Later, as I was making dinner, Emily asked if we could move to a new house where no one knows us. The question broke my heart. I told her we're safe here, but I started wondering if that's true. That night, I reviewed the ledger document again and noticed a phone number I hadn't seen. I called it, and a man answered, Guardian Services. I hung up, realizing this might be a fake agency set up to influence court appointments. I emailed everything to Sarah, and she responded that we have a strong case. But as I tried to sleep, I heard a noise outside, a car door slamming. I looked out the window and saw a figure hurrying away. It was too dark to see who, but I knew the threats weren't over. The day before the hearing, I focused on preparing my testimony. Sarah came over to practice, and we went through every point. Emily was at school, and the house felt too quiet. After Sarah left, I decided to visit the cemetery where my husband is buried. I needed strength. As I stood by his grave, I talked to him about everything, feeling a sense of peace. On the way back, I stopped at the bank to update my will, ensuring Emily is protected no matter what. The banker was kind, but I felt a pang of sadness doing this because of my own daughter. When I returned home, there was a package on the porch, no return address. I didn't open it. Instead, I called the police. They came and inspected it, finding it was just a box of old clothes, likely a scare tactic. They took it for evidence. Later, Michael called, saying he'd be in court with me tomorrow for support. I felt grateful, but nervous. That evening, I made Emily's favorite meal, and we watched a movie together. She fell asleep on the couch, and I carried her to bed. As I tucked her in, she whispered, Grandma, will you always be with me? I promised I would. After she was asleep, I checked the security footage and saw Leo's car drive by slowly. I called the police, and they said they'd send a car to patrol. I couldn't relax, so I organized all the documents for court. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Helen, calling from a blocked number. She was crying, saying she's sorry and wants to drop the case if I let her see Emily. I told her it's too late for that, and hung up. Was it genuine, or another trick? I didn't know. I went to bed, but lay awake, thinking about the hearing. The outcome will determine our future, and I have to be strong for Emily. The custody hearing was today. I dressed in my best suit, and Michael drove us to the courthouse. Emily stayed with a trusted friend. In the courtroom, Helen was there with her new lawyer, looking pale and thin. The judge listened to both sides. I presented my evidence, the ledger showing corruption, affidavits of my character, and the doctor's note confirming my health. Helen's lawyer argued that she is rehabilitated and deserves a chance, but under cross-examination, Helen admitted to lying about the dementia claim. The judge looked displeased. After a short recess, the ruling came. Permanent custody remains with me, and Helen's visitation is denied until she completes a rehabilitation program and has no contact with known associates. I felt a wave of relief, but Helen screamed and was escorted out. Outside, Michael hugged me, and we drove home. When we picked up Emily, I told her the news, and she smiled for the first time in weeks. Back home, I felt exhausted but victorious. We ordered pizza to celebrate, and for a while, it felt like a normal family evening. Later, I checked the mail and found a letter from Helen, apologizing and saying she'll get help. I don't know if I believe it, but I'll keep it for now. As I put Emily to bed, she said, I love you, Grandma. And I knew I'd done the right thing. But when I was alone, I thought about the long road ahead, therapy for Emily, possible appeals from Helen, and the lingering fear from Leo and his group. I decided to start looking into moving to a smaller, safer town where we can have a fresh start. For now, though, we're together and safe. I turned off the lights, checking the security one last time. Everything was quiet, but I know the battle might not be over yet. A week after the court ruling, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Helen had violated her release conditions by attempting to contact Emily through a friend's social media account. My hands tightened around the phone as I listened. I had to act fast to reinforce our safety. I called Sarah, and she advised me to document everything and report it to the police. After hanging up, I checked Emily's online accounts. I had set up parental controls, but this was a reminder that Helen wasn't giving up. Later that day, while Emily was at school, I visited a real estate agent to discuss selling my house and moving to a smaller town. The agent, a kind woman named Brenda, understood my need for discretion and promised to list it quietly. Back home, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. This house held memories of my husband and happier times with Helen, but now it felt like a prison. That evening, Michael visited, and we talked about the move. He offered to help with the logistics, but I insisted on handling it myself to avoid burdening him. After he left, I received an anonymous email with a photo of Emily playing in our backyard, taken recently. My blood ran cold. I forwarded it to the police and Joe. Joe called back, saying Leo had been spotted in the area and they were monitoring him. I doubled the security system, adding motion-sensitive lights. As I was installing them, I noticed a familiar car driving by slowly, Helen's. She didn't stop, but the message was clear. I went inside and hugged Emily, who was doing homework. She asked why I looked worried, and I smiled, saying everything was fine. But that night, I lay awake, planning our escape. The move couldn't happen soon enough. I decided to start packing tomorrow, focusing on essentials first. But as I drifted off, I heard a faint tap on the window, like a pebble hitting the glass. I sat up, heart pounding, and checked the camera. Nothing. Was it my imagination? Or were they getting bolder? I started packing the next morning, beginning with Emily's room to minimize disruption to her. She helped, her small hands folding clothes carefully. I explained we might move to a new house where we could feel safer. She nodded, but I saw the confusion in her eyes. After she left for school, I continued, boxing up kitchen items and documents. I found old photos of Helen, and a wave of grief hit me. How did our relationship come to this? I shoved the photos into a box labeled storage and moved on. Later, Brenda called with news, a potential buyer interested in a quick sale. She scheduled a viewing for tomorrow, but I insisted on no open houses to avoid attention. I also called a storage unit to move items gradually. That afternoon, I picked up Emily from school and noticed Leo's car parked nearby. I drove straight to the police station and reported it. An officer followed us home, but Leo was gone by then. Back home, I felt exhausted. My back ached from packing, and my blood pressure was rising. I took my medication and sat with Emily for dinner. She asked if we could have a dog in the new house, and I promised to consider it. A small comfort amid the chaos. After she slept, I reviewed our finances to ensure the move was feasible. My pension and savings were enough, but I worried about hidden costs. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Moving won't save you." I deleted it and blocked the number, but the fear lingered. I called Joe, and he suggested I stay with Michael for a few days. I declined, not wanting to involve him more. Instead, I packed a go bag with essentials and documents, ready to leave if needed. As I zipped it, I heard a car engine outside. I peered through the blinds and saw Helen's car idling at the curb. She didn't get out, just sat there watching. After 10 minutes, she drove away. I sighed, realizing this might be her way of saying goodbye, or a warning. Either way, I had to be ready. The day of the house viewing arrived, and I cleaned frantically, wanting everything perfect. Brenda brought the buyer, a young couple looking for a quiet home. I stayed in the kitchen while they toured, overhearing their positive comments. After they left, Brenda said they were very interested and might make an offer soon. I felt a glimmer of hope. Later, I took Emily to therapy, and her counselor said she was improving but still anxious about changes. On the way home, we stopped at the park, and for a moment, I let myself imagine a fresh start elsewhere. But when we returned, there was a letter from Helen's lawyer. She was appealing the custody decision again, citing new evidence of my instability. I felt dizzy with frustration. I called Sarah, and she assured me it was a stalling tactic, but we had to respond. That evening, Michael came over to help with packing, and I told him about the appeal. He offered to testify again if needed. While he was there, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with a package for Emily, no sender listed. I didn't open it. Instead, I called the police. They inspected it and found it was a stuffed animal, likely from Helen, with a note. "I miss you." I threw it away, but Emily saw it and cried. I comforted her, feeling anger toward Helen for playing with her emotions. After Michael left, I checked the security footage and saw Helen had been by earlier, dropping the package. I decided to confront her once and for all. I drove to her apartment, but she wasn't there. A neighbor said she had moved out recently. Where did she go? I called Joe, and he said he'd check. Back home, I felt uneasy. If Helen was hiding, what was she planning? That night, I dreamed of Emily being taken again and woke up sweating. I went to check on her, and she was sleeping peacefully. But as I turned to leave, I saw a shadow pass by her window. I rushed to look, but it was gone. Was it real, or my fear? I didn't know, but I couldn't risk it. I decided to accelerate the move. I accepted the offer on the house the next day. It was lower than I hoped, but I needed a quick sale. Brenda handled the paperwork, and we set a closing date for 3 weeks from now. I started looking at homes in a small town 2 hours away, where I had cousins. Michael helped me virtually tour a few, and one seemed perfect, a cozy cottage with a fenced yard. I put in an offer, and it was accepted. Relief washed over me, but there was still so much to do. I began transferring utilities and updating my address with banks and services. Later, I received a call from the police. Leo had been arrested on unrelated fraud charges, and they found photos of our house on his phone. They assured me he'd be in jail for a while, but I shouldn't let my guard down. I thanked them and felt a bit safer. That afternoon, I took Emily to say goodbye to her friends, and she handled it better than I expected. Back home, we packed more boxes, and I found an old journal of mine from when Helen was a child. Reading it, I remembered the good times, and I cried. Why couldn't she have stayed that sweet girl? I closed the journal and added it to the donate pile. As evening fell, I received a visit from Mrs. Gable, the social worker. She was following up on Emily's well-being and seemed pleased with our plans. She offered to provide a positive report for any future proceedings. After she left, I felt validated. I was doing the right thing. But then, my phone rang. It was Helen, from a new number. She sounded desperate, begging to see Emily one last time before we moved. I refused, saying it would only hurt Emily more. She hung up, sobbing. I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew it was for the best. Later, as I was locking up, I saw a figure across the street, Helen, watching the house. She didn't approach, just stood there for a minute before walking away. I wondered if this was her way of letting go. I went inside and held Emily close, telling her we were starting a new chapter. But as I lay in bed, I thought about Helen alone out there. Was she truly dangerous, or just lost? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I had to protect Emily. We moved into the cottage on a sunny morning, with Michael's help. The town was quiet, with friendly neighbours who welcomed us. Emily loved her new room and the big yard where she could play safely. I enrolled her in a local school, and she made friends quickly. Over the next few months, we settled into a routine: therapy sessions, walks in the park, and baking together. I joined a seniors book club and found solace in new friendships. Helen's appeal was dismissed, and she entered a rehabilitation program voluntarily. I heard through Sarah that she was doing better, but I kept my distance for Emily's sake. One day, a letter arrived from Helen, apologizing sincerely and wishing us well. I didn't respond, but I kept it in a drawer. Emily still asked about her mum sometimes, and I answered honestly but gently, focusing on the love we had now. As time passed, the fear faded, replaced by a sense of peace. I started gardening, planting flowers that reminded me of my husband, and Emily helped me water them. We got a small dog, just as she wanted, and named him Buddy. He barked at strangers, which made me feel safer. On weekends, Michael visited with his family, and our home filled with laughter. I knew there might be challenges ahead, but for now, we were happy. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Emily, watching the sunset, she leaned against me and said, "This feels like home, Grandma." I hugged her, tears in my eyes, and knew that all the struggle had been worth it. We had built a new life, away from the shadows of the past. And as the stars came out, I felt a quiet gratitude for this second chance, to be the grandmother Emily needed, and to find peace in my own heart. The journey had been hard, but we had made it through together.